Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for listening. We wanted to reinforce a couple things before we get started here. First of all, we want to encourage all of you to leave a review on iTunes. We are at like 90 or so reviews on iTunes. Our goal is 100 by the end of the year. I think we can get there, so let's do that. We thank you so much if you've left a review, and we really encourage everybody else to get on there and leave theirs. Or, you know what, any other platform as well. Reviews are good. I think that's the key point here. Also, we want to make sure you know that we're going to be live at the CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia Friedreich's Ataxia Symposium on October 14th. So be looking forward to that episode, or see us live if you're going to be there. It's going to be a really great time. Sean, what is going on today?
There is so much going on, and I'm excited to be here. But before we get into all the good stuff, I do want to give you a hard time real quick. Because you said at the beginning, you're like, hey, we just want to reinforce a couple things, which, I mean, it's fair to say that, but I feel like when you say the word reinforce, it's like we're building an army to go take over China or building nuclear weapons. I don't know. That's such a strong and aggressive word.
Well, you know, I'm an aggressive guy, so.
Hey, that's fair. Hey, before we get into the good stuff today, something came to mind. We're talking about the main topic, and I was encouraged or reminded of recent experiences I've had. So I wanted to share these experiences before we get into the good stuff today. Recently, Kyle and I have, well, I guess for the last couple of years, we ended up traveling quite a bit to the same destination. Obviously, Kyle and I live on opposite ends of the country, so we rarely travel together. And I realized that I feel like I travel more with Kyle's mom and dad than I do with you, Kyle.
Yeah.
Your parents and I have
meeting somewhere, right?
But your parents live, I don't know, an hour and a half away from me, or an hour and a half away from Sacramento. And so the airport, we both use Sacramento Airport, and we've been on the same flight together, I don't know, 3 or 4 times now, just in the last year or so. And it's been kind of fun running into them. You know, your dad's always willing to help take a bag. Your mom's willing to carry this or carry that. So I love it. It's been helpful. And then, of course, on the plane, there's maybe somebody to talk to or share a story with.
Yeah.
But recently, we were heading out of Seattle, right? You and I went and saw the Bridgemans. We were able to attend Kevin and Megan's wedding, and your parents attended too. So we're flying home, and your dad had changed your flights, or their flights, kind of last minute. So, you know, Southwest, there is no guaranteed seating. It's first come, first serve. And because they had changed their flights so last minute, they ended up in boarding group Z, it felt like.
What?
They were like the last thing on the plane. Well, I think technically Southwest only has A, B, or C, but they may as well have been at the end of the alphabet, right?
I see what you did there.
So I get on the plane, typically early, with the pre-board pass or, you know, ability. So I get on the plane, and usually I'll try to save them seats so we can all sit together. Well, this particular flight was pretty full, and since they were boarding group last, I had so many people walk by. Oh, can we sit there? I'm like, I'm saving them. Dude, I probably said I'm saving them probably 15 times. And normally I don't feel bad because it's only 2 or 3, and then your parents are there. But this time, I literally think they were the last people to get on the plane. And part of me felt really bad, but the other part of me didn't. It's like, whatever.
What row was it?
Oh, like row 5 or 4.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, up front.
Right. The coveted 5th row.
Right. So part of me, I don't know, I was feeling bad. But I would much rather, I was thinking about it for me, I look at people that put their bag in a seat just simply because they don't want somebody sitting next to them.
Yeah.
And those people are rude. I don't know if I would be considered rude for saving seats from my friends, but I did. And it was,
however,
it was worth it.
Is it only not rude because it's you? I mean, it's yourself.
I don't know. If somebody said they were saving the seat for a loved one, I don't know that I would be bothered by that.
Yeah, that's
true. But if
true.
somebody's like, oh, this seat is for my suitcase, that would bother me. So
Yeah. All right. Got it.
And the guy...
I remember...
Go ahead.
Well, I know. Slightly tangent subject. I remember at the wedding in Seattle telling you, I don't think I've traveled anywhere with you without my parents for like a long time.
Yeah, it's been a minute. They are good and reliable companions for sure.
Yeah, and they're fun to hang out with. My
totally.
mom always has a funny comment or, bringing somebody into the conversation that...
And I like it too with your dad, especially, for people that know Mike, he's a very quiet individual. He's not very social. And in the midst of like the wedding, I didn't know a whole lot of people. So it was cool to have your dad always to just hang out with and chat with, have a beer with, while your mom and you were out shaking hands and making new friends.
Nice.
Anyway, I think of that because there were a couple different weddings recently, which is really what inspired the topic that you're going to lead us through today. So lead us through the main theme or subject of this episode, would you?
Yeah, I'll give you the overarching thought and then kind of give you the details of my experience. So the thought is that the only thing that's constant in life is change, right? That's such a cliche. Like, there's so many songs that use that lyric and all this stuff, right? But it's so true. And, I think that people with disabilities, and especially a progressive disease, really illustrates this, because I think people with progressive disease have to go through physical changes a lot more quickly. And, I think it's a good sort of experiment to look at, right? A case study to look at when we look at progressive disease to figure out how to go through transitions. We can use progressive disease as an example. I think it relates to everyone, right? Because we're all going through transitions. But if you have a progressive disease, it's just a little more quickly. And, like we always say on this episode, it's about, we can't avoid those things most of the time, but it's about how we react to those things. Yeah. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about today. We kind of started this conversation in episode 55. We talked about the transitions and some of the virtues of a wheelchair and making the transition from walking to a cane to a walker to a wheelchair and all that stuff. And so this is kind of a continuation of that conversation, and it's especially relevant right now for me because I just got a power chair. And I call it a power chair, but it's really a mix between a scooter and a power chair. But let me real quick go through what led to my decision to make that leap to the scooter. So I was at my friend Blake's wedding. You know Blake. He was on our crew in Race Across America, and he got married to his lovely wife Serena a few weeks ago. And their wedding was all outside, and it was a camping wedding. That seems to be a trend lately. Right. Is weddings that like require camping outdoors. So anyway, I was in my manual chair, and it was all dirt and gravel and whatever, outdoors. And as you can imagine, I can't move under my own power hardly at all in my manual chair if I'm in that terrain.
Totally.
And so it was a little bit frustrating because, like, if I had to go to the bathroom or something, I'd have to be like, "Hey, Dad," or "Hey, Dan, can you take me over behind that tree so I can go?" And it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't the end of the world, but it just took away some independence. And I was like, you know what? If I had a scooter, I'd be able to do this on my own. So that's kind of what triggered the thought. And, I've been thinking about it for a long time. This was kind of the needle that broke the,
straw, the straw that broke the camel's back. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah. That's the one. Okay. That's it. Needle in a haystack. Yeah. So we went to the wedding, Kevin and Megan's wedding. It was out on an island. It was, again, outdoors. And we took a plane, then a bus, then a water taxi to get there. Yeah. It was quite a journey. But leading up to it, I had rented a scooter to do the wedding because I knew it was going to be all outdoors and I wanted to see what it was like. So I rented it before I jumped in feet first, head first. I'm getting all these metaphors.
It's good. You're just hitting the hammer right on the side.
Nice. All right. So I rented this scooter and it was so life-changing. Oh my gosh. I didn't get help hardly at all, except maybe up and down a couple stairs that I had to do during the weekend. But even that was pretty simple. But I could go anywhere in this thing, on the grass, on the gravel, on the dirt, and I could like carry a drink if I wanted to, and I could go wherever. Like I could, if I'm sitting there and I see somebody I want to talk to, I can go over and talk to them. Like that seems like something we really take for granted, and it was taken away from me, and then given back, and holy cow, it was life changing. So when I got back, I decided to buy a scooter.
Oh wow!
And it was it was kind of a significant step for me, just as far as the transition of FA and just the progression of it, and understanding that, this disease is progressing to the point where I need a power scooter chair.
Or I'm thinking too, even if you don't need one, just from the experience of renting for a couple of days, you were able to experience so much more freedom in a sense, and maybe a peace of mind in terms of, I don't know if safety had a part of that, but just having the ability to roll over and roll to somebody, just start a conversation, or roll to the bathroom, or roll to the bar, or roll wherever you wanted to, instead of having to reach out and ask for help or whatever it may be. Yeah. So I think even if you didn't need it, which I'm willing to bet you could probably keep going without it, But how much more fun and easier and better is it having one?
Yeah, totally. I agree. I could go forever, but without using one. But then, you know what? I feel like when I have somebody push me, I lose a little bit of independence. Mm-hmm. And, you can argue both ways on that. But my thought is, when there's one more person in the equation, it's not a bad thing. But when there's one more person in the equation, all of a sudden I am at the mercy of some of their influence on where I want to go or what I want to do. And at the mercy of their mood and their input into the situation, which most time is not a bad thing, but that's just how it is, right? And so when I can be the complete master of what I want to do, it's just a different experience. And that's what I've experienced with this new scooter. And so I ordered it on a Monday. It showed up to my house on a Thursday, free shipping. Wow. Holy cow, like 3 days later, right?
Well, I mean, you paid $10,000 for it. It better... No, I'm just kidding.
No, so I put it together. Actually, my neighbor had to help me get the boxes inside and get it out of the boxes. We put it together, and she left. The first thing I did was take out my garbage. Like... Nice. How much do we take that for granted, totally. Right? But think about this. Like when you take out your garbage, think about sitting in a wheelchair and both hands are occupied with powering the chair, right? So what do you do with the garbage? You have to put your garbage on your lap or squeeze it between your knees or something, right? Like how... And then, like, one time I had some broken glass on my garbage. Jeez. And, okay, that is not a safe situation, sure. Right? Anyway, so I grabbed my garbage, and I could hold it with one hand and use the joystick on my scooter with the other hand. And it was, like, 1,000,000 times easier.
Oh, sure.
And at that point, I was like, oh, my gosh, this was the best thing I ever did,
Sure. I can't imagine, just seeing you roll around the island wedding, that just looked cool and looked easier and looked, obviously it's faster, thanks, so it's, it's probably not as exhausting, and I can imagine just, like I said, being able to take out your own garbage is something that a lot of us take for granted. So that's a cool metaphor. Not only are you taking out your kitchen garbage, but maybe taking out the garbage of the thought process of the mentality behind not wanting to make that adjustment or make that transition. So,
yeah. And so, I mean, I think this sort of leads back to the discussion that we were having in episode 55 is that, every transition is a little bit difficult. I've been through quite a few transitions, and so this one is not as big for me as, like, say, the transition it took from walking to a wheelchair for the first time. That one was pretty crazy. But, I think as you start going through these things, you start understanding that you just need to make things work for you in your situation. So anyway, that's where I am. I remember, so you and I shared like a cabin. There's these little cabins on the island, and you were on the couch, on the pull-out couch, and so we're walking back at like 12:30 or something. It wasn't too late, but it was dark, and it was uphill. And it was steep, and we're in the grass. And in that situation, there's no way I ever could have made it in my manual chair.
Totally.
But I was just buzzing along in my scooter, just like, hurry up, dude.
Yeah,
let's
go. Move it. Yeah, definitely a benefit for sure. I can't, I haven't transitioned a whole lot. I went through from an upright back to the trike. and little tiny things around the house to, move around safely. I've talked about in another episode my transition from a real wine glass to a corksicle with the lid has been phenomenal. But I can only imagine with every little transition you got to make, there is that mental or emotional barrier. So, you said going into a wheelchair the very first time was kind of a big step. Did you have any emotional, did you wrestle with your emotions or your mindset on this particular one? It's so recent. Was there anything that you really, that caused you to take your time on making this decision?
Yeah, I actually, it was recent, but I've been thinking about it for a few years now because specifically at Ride a Taxi events, most of them are on the grass, like under the tent. And so when I'm in my manual chair, it's really hard for me to move around on the grass. And I usually have to have somebody help me, which is fine, but I wanted to be able to do it on my own. So for that reason, I had been looking for a while.
Okay.
So it wasn't an immediate transition, but yes, absolutely. It's just another checkpoint where FA comes out and goes, all right, who's in charge here?
A reminder that you live with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, at that point, you've got to stand your ground, your mental ground and be like, you know what? I'm in charge here. You are not. And it's not a matter of the physical, maybe, of who's in charge, because obviously that's not a winning battle for you. Yeah. But ultimately, it's the mental part of it is, all right, I'm in charge and I can go with the flow and I can get these things done. One of the things I said in one of the earlier episodes is, the point of my life is not walking, like to stay on 2 feet. That's not the point of my life. I don't claim to know the point of life, but I know that walking is not the point.
Totally.
And so, in my search for meaning or whatever, like I can realize that if I need a power chair or a wheelchair or whatever else to get me there, like that's what I need to do.
Yep.
So,
yeah, and I think there's nothing. Sure, maybe it's hard for me to say it or think this, or easy for me to say it and think it, but I feel like there shouldn't be any shame in that. Right. There probably is, but man, I wish there wasn't.
Right. So, Sean, you're on your feet right now, and I know that you know what? I don't think it's anything we've really talked about all that much, but what do you think about the timing of a wheelchair, if you'll need one, and our search for a cure for FA and what that means for you, and all that stuff? What do you think?
Well, I feel like I'm not afraid of a chair. But I also don't think that I've been anywhere near needing a chair. So I don't know. I think when that day comes, I'm okay with it. Being surrounded by so many friends with FA or friends with other conditions or diseases, and so many of those friends already being in a wheelchair or maybe using walkers or different devices to help them with their mobility. I feel like for me, I just see it as an inevitable thing. And, a lot of my, half my circle of friends are already there. So I feel like it may not be as challenging when that time comes, although I could be wrong. I see it being a bit of a internal wrestling match, I'm sure, but I also am okay with that. I feel like in my head, at least.
Yeah, I think you touch on an important thing, is that I think it's really valuable for us to connect with others in the community and see how they handle these things. Because some people are going to handle it better than others. And what you get to do when you meet multiple people in the community is you get to observe and you get to take the good things and the good tips that are in whatever the attitudes that you see other people having and the thoughts. You get to take all the good stuff and you get to leave all the bad stuff if you want. And so in something like this, I think that's the real value of connecting with the others in the community.
Yeah, and, on top of planning ahead or thinking ahead, besides having a really good friendship group, I also think about how those series of transitions will impact my immediate life. So even, I don't work in the rare disease community full time. So even though it's really helpful to have a circle of friends that maybe are connected, my day job, I think, would look significantly different if I were in a wheelchair. And so I think about that every now and then, especially when I'm at work and I start to stumble or, I'm having to lean on walls to get down the hallway. I think, if that day were to be here next month or next week or next year, how might that impact my job or some of the different things I do every day? And I don't think of it in a bad way. I trust that my employer would be very accommodating. But I do think about what that might look like or how it might roll out if and when that day comes.
Yeah, and I think it's important to think of it in both respects, both in the aspect of, like, how is it going to limit things in your job, in your life, but also how is it going to make things better?
That's true.
You know what? And which one outweighs the other at what point, right? Sure. That's the whole balancing act. That's the whole decision right there. And thinking about both sides of the equation.
Thinking about scooters, I'm reminded of our time in Australia last year. Our host over there, our friends, and, I would almost call them family, they took us to the Australia Zoo, Steve Irwin's spot. And I had no intention of getting a chair, but when we all got there, it was kind of they have these motorized scooters. They're not very expensive. Maybe we should rent them. And renting one, I got one. Having that made the zoo experience so much better than it would have been had I walked all day. Everybody would have had to wait for me, or they would have left me behind. And I would have been so tired so fast. But having the chair allowed me to keep up to speed and allowed me to go for, I don't remember, 7 to 8 hours. And I wasn't exhausted at the end of the day. Or as exhausted, anyway.
Yeah, and so in that situation, the good things, what you're saying is the good things probably outweigh the bad. And sure. I think that's one of the things that I'm going to have to do. Now that I have a scooter, like, I need to weigh that out. It's going to be a situation-by-situation experience, like, how much am I going to have to travel with it? In and out, like, it doesn't go in and out of an Uber as easily as my manual chair and stuff like that, So I think it's just something that you constantly have to weigh.
So talk about that for a little bit before we go. What the nuts and bolts, the function of that particular scooter for you. Does it, I know it's only been a couple days, but are you able to drive or travel with it, or is it just at home? Like, how's that playing out so far?
So it only weighs 112 pounds, which is awesome.
Pretty good for a motorized chair, for sure.
Yeah. So, yesterday, I went to lunch with Paul and Ryan, who you met Paul. I don't think you've met Ryan before, but we went to lunch, and they were able to lift it into my van. We needed to take my van because we needed the room to be able to fit it, but we were able to do it. Also, it breaks apart into 3 pieces.
Okay.
And the heaviest piece is 40 pounds. And I haven't tried it yet, but apparently you can fit it in the trunk of a car. If the trunk obviously has nothing else in it,
Sure.
right? So it is quite versatile compared to other scooters. However, it's a consideration. It weighs 112. My manual chair weighs probably like 20 pounds,
Right.
So I'm not going to be lifting it in and out of my van by myself.
Sure.
So, it's going to have to be a case-by-case situation. But, oh, my gosh, around the house here, for example, like, I usually, when I go to get my mail, I get it on the way home, right? So I drive to the mailbox. It's a little ways away from my apartment, up a little bit of a hill, not too bad. I could make it my manual chair, but it would be a pain in the butt. Now, like, I haven't done it yet, but I'm looking forward to going to get the mail.
Without having to get in your car?
Yeah, without having to get, simply because I can.
Yeah.
And so just like that's something that I actually didn't even think of before, but I'm really looking forward
So
to
the
it.
exciting things in your life right now are taking out your own garbage and getting your own mail from the mailbox. I'm not making fun. Those are important pieces of life. I'm kind of making fun, but so I know that you have a trip coming up soon. Do you anticipate traveling with it, or you're not there yet?
I'm not quite there yet because we're going to be in and out of Ubers and rental cars and all this stuff with different people. And so I really think I need to experiment a little more by myself and with people who, when it's not critical to make it to a meeting on time.
Sure.
I know what I can do in my manual chair, so I think I'm going to stick with that for now. And maybe in the future, I'll travel with it more. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, you'll have to be sure to include a picture or a link in our show notes showing our listeners what kind of chair or maybe how it's working out for you.
Yep, definitely. We'll post some photos. So, Sean, thanks for the conversation today, and I hope it was valuable for some of our listeners, and we will see you next time.
Have a good day. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
Find us online at twodisableddudes.com, and please subscribe on the iTunes. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
And special thanks to our audio producer, Jake Tompkins.
Until next time, keep living with urgency.